Good afternoon, everybody. This is Marquis Devereaux, Verbal Assault Livestream. We are a political podcast that hits from left, right, and center. What we do is we have both sides of the equation. We have people from the left, people from the right. They debate an issue. And basically what we do is we try to find common ground. I have a whole host of characters joining us today. I would like to welcome back Ms. Cherokee Black as my camera moves on me. Sorry about that, guys. She is an international model. I have Sam Schwartz. He identifies as a socialist. I have Mr. Kirk Adair, author and historian. Nurka Encarnacion, who is an Afro-Caribbean activist and researcher. Mr. Nick Morganelli, who is a TV personality and weather forecaster. Bob, the anonymous conservative, don't ask him why he's wearing the paper bag. And Mr. Samuel Kachira, my co-host. Sam, I got a question for you.
Yeah, man.
Do you know anything about this attack on the protester that happened in Albany, New York? Do you know anything about that?
In Albany, no, but there was one in Buffalo.
Buffalo.
Are you talking about the old man?
I sure am. Thank you for correcting me. Well, you know, he's
the
75
older
years
guy.
Older guy, exactly. Basically, we've observed that he was pushed by police. His head hit the ground, and he was bleeding from the back of the head.
Right.
Sam, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I didn't particularly like it. I don't know all the facts about it, as probably none of us do. But I still think that just looking at the man, knowing that he was of an older generation, then maybe that much force should not have been used. Maybe.
His head hits the ground and it's bleeding from the back. Maybe that much force should not have been used.
That's right.
Your president and not my president got into the mix, and he said, I think this man was a representative of Antifa. What does Antifa have to do with a man's head hitting the ground?
Well,
Yurka, take it.
Narisha, yeah.
Well, from what I researched, Antifa is a group whose goal is abolition of the ICE, police, and the U.S. government. And their philosophy is that they'll do anything necessary to reach their goal, including violence. I researched this man, and he actually appears in many other protests.
Absolutely.
And he has impersonated many different characters in these protests, as well as what happened in Buffalo was that he appeared as if he was using a scanner, and that scanner is used to take information. So before he was pushed, that he came in front, not in front, but he came close to one of the police officers. He reached out his hand, and he was really close, like almost touching the police officer. So the police officer behind him was the one that came over and pushed him because of what he thought it was a scanner. Now, whether it was a scanner or not, I'm not clear, but there is a lot, there is a lot of questions about this man. Because also they showed how when he was going inside the ambulance, apparently he was really hurt, but he was on the phone talking and he looked like he was okay.
You know, okay, so Sam says maybe he should have been pushed that hard. Nurka says apparently, but I saw blood on the sidewalk. Whether the man was from Antifa or Black Lives Matter, or whether he was from, I don't know, Hezbollah, does he deserve to have his head cracked on the ground? Kirk Adair, I'd love for you to pick up on this. You're a mature gentleman. Can you imagine something like this happening to yourself?
Well, I wouldn't, first of all, I wouldn't have approached the police that way. That's number one. Number two, the guy has a record as a professional protester. All right. He's also exactly what Nurika was sharing earlier. He has a record He has a record for being confrontational with police at various protests that he's been involved in. Okay, no, he didn't deserve to hit his head on the ground, but 2 cops should have simply escorted him to the side. And yes, it did look like he was using a scanner, and he was fine in the back of the ambulance, and he was on the phone to the people that were paying him because he's a paid protester.
Okay, so I'm hearing maybe apparently
that they should have escorted him to the side.
Okay, so he is a paid protester. He is someone supposedly, apparently, maybe. These are a lot of accusations, and I'm still trying to get an understanding of the head hitting the ground, blood on the sidewalk. Was, Bob the Anonymous Conservative, is this all an act? What are you thinking about all this?
Oh, I don't think any of it is an act. I guess the thing I'm really concerned about is, the people that get involved in, the violence aspect of protests. That's the problem. People have a right to protest. I don't care what side of the, position or issue you're on, you have a right to protest. It's when it gets violent, that's when everyone needs to step back and kind of evaluate things. And unfortunately, emotions run high and things happen and all that. And, that's where we see the tragedies in life.
Yes, Marquis. So when you're hearing about violence, first of all, don't you delineate between rioting and protesting?
They're 2 different things.
They are, correct? So if you're having a peaceful protest, what is your feeling about having bricks mysteriously appear at a protest?
It's a diversion.
It's a what?
It's a diversion. It's because it's to take away. It's a distraction.
You would call it a distraction, Turkey.
It's instigating.
Could you also say it's a? Could you also say it's an implant designed to steer the protest into that direction?
To create an outcome.
Yes, of course.
Create an outcome. Very good.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a purpose.
Yep.
So where do we think that these bricks have come from?
They came from the Acme Brick Company, okay, which is owned by the Berkshire Hathaway Corporation. Acme Bricks.
This is not a joke?
This is not a joke.
Oh, he's real.
I was waiting for Wile E. Coyote.
Warren Buffett and Robert Pritzker. It's the Merriman Group out of Chicago that own Acme Brick, and they're dropped all over the country ahead of time.
Wow.
In non-construction sites, I might add.
In non-construction sites. And the trouble was that the police and the fire department didn't tag them soon enough, because if they're sitting on the street and it's not a construction site, that's a fine. That's
Right.
number 1. And it's causing a public hazard. That's number 2. So they should have been tagged twice.
So Kirk, how do you figure that Acme owns this? Were these bricks numbered or do they have stamps on them? How do we know that these bricks are from Acme?
Because of the deliveries.
What do you mean? Explain.
The Acme Brick delivered to very specific sites all over the country. They're owned by their parent company is Berkshire Hathaway.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is, how do we know? I mean, these bricks, were they numbered? Were they wrapped with Acme logos? Like, how do we know that this came from Acme?
Because they were identified by their drop sites and they were identified by their deliveries.
And invoices, right? There were invoices to track it, right?
Invoices, yeah.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, there's a paper trail.
So the invoices were left there in the
trail
site with the
that
bricks. I mean, I'm losing y'all. The invoices were left there with the bricks. I mean, how do we know?
You guys can't see the forest from the trees here. You're getting into the nitty gritty. You don't understand what Antifa stands for. It's anti-fascist. So if you're saying you're against anti-fascists, what are you saying? This organization, Antifa, was started in I think in Oregon, in Portland, Oregon, in 2007. It's against white supremacy. It's against Nazism. It's against nationalism. It's against the Klan. It's not one single organization, but it's composed of many different groups. They don't have any base, is what I'm saying, and they're in other countries. They don't have a method. They don't have a philosophy. They don't have a principle that they act on. That is general principle, and therefore they don't have any permanent goals. To say that they have permanent goals, I never heard their permanent goals. Trump has designated Antifa as not a discrete or as a terror organization, but they're not discrete. They're not centralized organization, so it's unclear how the government could give it this designation, since they don't wear uniforms and they don't carry signs. And I look for
black all the
time. Don't carry signs identifying themselves.
One second.
So this is a diversion, as Cherokee said, by the right to create confusion and to delegitimize the Black Lives Matter and the justified protests of the masses in the streets who are protesting police violence. And not only police violence.
Let me step in for a second, Sam.
But black people, but protesting against the state capitalism. They're protesting against. I'm not state capitalism. Capitalism.
Second, Sam.
So that's what this is.
Sam,
where did you get that information from?
And they're trying. I'm sorry,
guys. I'm sorry. Don't mind me, just the host of the show here.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's okay, because everyone needs to understand and get some clarity. Nick Morganelli, I'd like to ask you, he made an accusation that the right is basically slandering Antifa. I'd like to ask you, what is the president's role during the protests? What is his role?
Well, so I want to start with just the terrorist. What defines a terrorist organization? If in my view, a terrorist organization would be a group that has violent actions against society, right? And not only just regular violence. This is incredible violence. I think this is definitely homegrown terror. Whoever's now, and they say, Antifa is not organized. If it's Antifa that's doing all this violence, you've got organized fires in cities under siege, and shameful, because a lot of these fires and this stuff is happening in Black communities, which is hurting the Black communities, which is not what we want to do right now. I mean, we want to support the Black people and what they want to stand for.
In addition to the organization, the organizing of the bricks being dropped off, they're also organizing the bottles filled with kerosene or gasoline, the Molotov cocktails.
Yes.
So yes, I mean, and somebody bought these bricks, right? If what Kirk said was true, that there's an invoice somewhere. I mean, somebody called this company, had bricks delivered to certain places. Like, we need a pallet of bricks on this address, and they deliver the bricks. And it may not be, the company may not even realize that they're doing this, supporting violence, if that's what's happening. The president's role, the president should, he works with, obviously, intel, okay? And they're seeing they see the protests, and then they see the violence. And they're defining the violence as terror. I mean, this is homegrown terror. So he says it's Antifa. I mean, he's probably being told by, this is Antifa, this is this group. And so he's saying Antifa is, terrorists, and we're defining it as a terrorist group. They may have good aspirations. There's a lot of things they do that are good. There's a lot of things that they do that are against what America stands for. It's capitalism, freedom, free enterprise, entrepreneurship. I mean,
and racism.
They behind
Wall Street, and exploitation, and capitalism, and terrorism. What do you think we're doing in Iraq? What do you think we've done in Afghanistan?
Yeah, and I'm not saying
that's not terrorism. Come on.
I'm not saying that they're wrong in all the things that they're doing. I'm just saying that with the violence, if they're behind the violence, the president should stand up and say, we're against violence, and he did say that. I'm a law and order president. We want
that means he's for violence. That means he's for violence. Understand what you're saying. The state is basically the police. The police are to force the rule of the minority class, which is Trump's class. He's a billionaire. Any one of us here have $1 billion? He represents billionaires and the ruling class of society. This is not a hidden thing. This is right out in the open. Okay.
Okay.
So this.
I want to jump in here for a second.
So, so the focus. Wait, just let me say 1 second. The focus is on some insignificant bricks and some insignificant details,
not
which he's trying to. This is what he's trying to do: is distracting away the attention and confusing people.
Yeah,
that's their ploy. This is their ruling class's ploy.
You know what, Marky, just give me 1 second. Let me just address Sam for a moment. Sam, when you talk about distraction and you talk about this is all under President Trump, he wants to distract from whatever. Let me tell you, I don't think it's much of a distraction. I think it's more hurtful when someone picks up the brick and hurts someone. When someone picks up the brick and smashes another window. Those windows typically, aside from the big names.
How about smashing people in the head?
That's right. How about that? How about them smashing the head? How about the small businesses?
The poor guy up in
the small black-owned businesses
on the ground.
Guys, everybody, if you're all talking at once, the audience can't hear you. Hello, stop. If everyone's talking at once, the audience cannot hear you. I need you to respectfully let a person finish and keep your replies to 1 minute, please. Sam, please continue.
Thank you.
So I would like to finish by saying that people getting hurt, I don't look at as a distraction. I look at that as a problem. Yeah. People getting killed, that's a bigger problem.
Right.
Yeah. So if you think that Trump particularly put Acme bricks on the street as a distraction, and then let the people pick up the bricks and hurt someone, or breaking down small business, black business-owned businesses, I think that's not a distraction. I think that's a problem.
Who hit people with a brick? I'd like to know. Tell me that. I just want to know.
Who hit people with a bullet? Who hit people with a bullet, Sam?
The police. The police.
Let's go back for a second. Let's go back. The subject today is the attack on Antifa. Yeah. We have branded Antifa as a terrorist organization, even though they're against the very things that we call terror.
Right.
We have branded Black Lives Matter as an organization that condones violence, even though they're speaking on behalf of those who are being attacked. We've done the same thing with the Black Panther, and we've done the same thing with many groups. Black Lives Matter. On what levels should they be taking blame? Bob, the anonymous conservative, I'd like you to go ahead and take that one.
Well, speaking of Black Lives Matter directly, if I recall, there were a couple of phrases they were chanting when they were marching during one of their protests. Now, this was not this year, but let me reflect my memory here. Pigs in a blanket, fry them like bacon. And there was another phrase that they were using in one of their protest chants. What do we want? Dead cops. When do we want it? Now.
So I'm gonna interject here. There's a song out called "Fuck the Police," very popular rap song from the 90s. Do we put those guys in jail? Do we accuse them of inciting violence? Kirk Adair, what's your thought on that?
It is inciting violence. And as far as Antifa goes, it's funded by George Soros. That's number one. Number two, keep laughing. It's funded by George Soros. All right. And
I don't buy conspiracy theories, pal.
That's documentary proof, George.
It's a fact. All right.
It's a fact.
They dress in black. They wear masks. They behave as exactly what they're supposed to be opposed to. They behave as fascists. They act as agents provocateurs. They are the ones that start the violence while people are having peaceful protests.
So let's ask this question: who is funding Black Lives Matter? Who is funding the Black Panthers?
Well, I don't know who is funding the Black Panthers because you drew that in. Black Lives Matter gets a lot of money from the Clinton Foundation. They get a lot of money from George Soros. Soros is nobody's friend here. Soros is
You're the only
pushing
one that mentioned
as hard
George Soros.
as possible to have martial law in this country. And he's doing it under the guise of protesting the 1% of protesting.
You're saying who would like martial law?
And he's funding it. He has been funding it.
You're saying that George Soros would like martial law?
Absolutely.
It Soros wants to destabilize the United States.
Absolutely.
He's a one-world globalist.
He is a globalist, and anything that achieves that goal, left or right, is in his favor. And that is exactly what he's been funding. He is a front for all of that.
He's a front for who is all of them? Who are them?
He's a front for a lot of the protest organizations that are pro-violence. And Antifa is pro-violence. They say they're anti-fascist, but they behave like fascists, and they dress in black. And people should be aware of that, because the brown shirt's dressed in brown. The new color is black. That's what the SS wore. That is exactly what Hitler used as a terror tactic.
So we are comparing Antifa to Hitler.
Antifa actually goes back to around 1932. It's not a new organization. It's just
not new.
resurfaced.
It's been corrupted.
Okay, so Cherokee Black, since you have a better understanding of what Antifa's roots are, would you care to explain so that maybe Sam Schwartz isn't the only one that has an understanding of what their intention is?
It's a group that started in around 1932. I forgot, but it was an anti-fascist group. It resurfaced again in 1985, and it's resurfaced. It always resurfaces when there's an upheaval in a nation regarding whatever it is, just to create chaos and confusion and keep the eye off the ball, basically.
Absolutely.
Okay, so aside from Sam Schwartz, everyone here feels that Antifa, which is supposed to be an anti-fascist organization, condones violence.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
I would say I wouldn't say condones violence. I would say that they use violence as a tool.
They use it and they encourage it
to get their job done.
Okay,
and that's wrong on so many levels. Why, anyone who uses violence as a tool, they should be a terrorist.
Before I shift,
like the police. The police use violence.
No.
Okay.
Listen,
Thank you.
The police are there to serve and protect, and they do that
who
99.99% of the time.
Who do they serve? You're throwing around words. Who do they serve? In reality, who are they serving? They're serving the ruling class, which Trump belongs to, and he's trying to divert their attention.
Good.
I would have to say, Sam,
away from the real problem. That's why how many people in over 1,400 cities, counties, rural areas are in the street protesting against police violence?
Not like this president.
Not Antifa. They're not, or George Soros. They're protesting against police violence. I'm probably as old as the gentleman, older than the gentleman that was knocked down on the street. I remember Fred Hampton, the same bullshit in the cover-up in Chicago, okay, of the Panther Party. He was a true leader. The FBI was afraid of him, and why? Because he was starting to widen the scope of support. He was a brilliant leader.
I'd like to bring some attention to the panel.
Mark Clark, and then they covered it up.
Sam Schwartz, thank you. Give me 1 second, please. I'd like to bring something to the attention of the panel. We're describing Antifa as a terrorist organization. We're associating Black Lives Matter oftentimes with violence. Whether that's right or wrong, I'm going to let the audience decide on that. But I'm going to mention the fact that at the present time, we have the military in cities. We're seeing video on social media of law enforcement officers and the military interacting with peaceful protesters and inciting violence. We're seeing it. So either we're against violence or we're pro-violence, but action is known to speak louder than words. You know, Samuel, I'm going to let you ask a few questions here, but I don't understand why we're constantly branding people that take on their own power as violent. Samuel, go ahead.
I don't fully agree with you, because what you're not mentioning is the flip side, where there are the police officers and the military that are interacting with the protesters, and they're in solidarity. They're taking knees together. They're hugging each other. I saw a video recently.
They're marching with them. Yes.
Yes, I saw a video recently where one guy, just some random guy, who was walking around with I don't know what this thing is, but it's like a massive water gun, like a pump water gun.
I saw it too.
Yeah, and then he would just like slide it on the ground up to the military. Anyone dressed in military uniform, they would pick it up, and all of a sudden they're having a water bomb fight. Right? It was all in good fun. They're rolling around on the ground.
So you're asking me. So you're asking me to put some focus on this. But I watched a video in DC where a helicopter was flown low. I saw rubber bullets and tear gas and people in panic in the District of Columbia, which is not a state. Therefore, it does not have a governor, which means that the federal government takes precedence. This was my observation. So when we talk about violence, this is what people are seeing.
DC is in disarray. DC has a mayor who is definitely partisan. She's put on the street, Black Lives Matter. So that means white lives don't matter? Does that mean children don't matter?
Just cut that.
Let's back that up for a second. Is there anyone that has a problem with the term Black Lives Matter?
I don't have a problem with the term, but what I want to bring up, and you can look this up, please look it up, because we need to understand what we're talking about. There is a former Black Lives Matter in Ferguson organizer. His name is Chaziel Sons, and he exposes the Democrats and Antifa. And what he explains in his video is that Black Lives Matters was formed as a to be outspoken, to bring awareness of police brutality in certain forms. And he explains how it has been infiltrated. And he clearly states and gives the name of George Soros Group. So Black Lives Matter has been infiltrated. And this is why it becomes an issue that if somebody else gets hurt and they say, oh, but all lives matter, they become violent, they become aggressive. And that was not even the point. The point was to bring awareness.
To the different policing, right.
Exactly. So it becomes something crazy in which people's minds are going all over the place, and it's actually violent.
So
it
what
wasn't
is
meant to be violent?
Nurka, so let me ask you, so what is crazy about saying all Black Lives Matter?
Well, because at this point, it's not only Black people who are being who are being hurt. Other people are being hurt, and those people hurt as well. So what I'm saying is that when, let's say, for example, my friend is hurt and she's a white woman, she's hurting for me. She hurts for me, right? If I say her life matter as well, somebody comes aggressively towards me, oh, it's only Black Lives Matter, and that's not even the point. Because at the end of the day, all lives matter. Black Lives Matter point was to bring awareness of police violence
against Black people.
Against Black people.
Yes.
But
I don't know if
that other races do not matter.
I'm sorry. I'm here. Let me rephrase the question.
I don't know about
the question that I asked was, does anyone have a problem with Black Lives Matter? And we're saying, but all lives matter. The question maybe that I should ask is, why do Black lives matter less? How's that?
Mark, let me
They don't matter.
Morganelli, go ahead and take
All
this.
lives mattered. We would not need a phrase Black Lives Matter. That's the whole point. There's a different policing that's being done in this country where Black men, women, and children are dying before getting a fair trial or whatever. And white people can blow up churches and get to the court and go to jail.
Correct.
That's the point.
That's
the
correct.
point.
Yeah, that's correct.
That's correct.
So everyone agrees that there is an issue with policing in this, or does everyone agree? Nick Morganelli, I'd like you to go ahead and take that.
Well, I mean, if you look at the statistics over the last several years, it's something like 93% of deaths from blacks have been at the hands of another Black person. To me,
Oh, here we go.
So that's one thing, and also the police. It's something like, the statistic I saw was 375 million calls or interactions with people. Okay, in the last year, every year there's about 375 million interactions, police with people. Could be a car accident, could be a robbery, whatever. Only 9 Black people have died at the hands of a police officer.
That you know of,
Hold on.
because it's not
Too many people
Let
talking.
me
1 second,
finish,
please.
and then you can comment. Okay, so from what I saw, it was like 9, and then out of those 9, there were even less that were unarmed. It was only like 3 or 5 or something like that. So my point is, I think Black Lives Matter, the organization, would have a lot more positive impact on the Black community if they really focused on the inner cities, number one, and on conversations between police and the Black community to get them to come together, because I really think there's a great disrespect for the men and women in blue that serve and protect and to keep people safe, whether it's a car accident or a fire or unfortunately having to march down the street to make sure the peaceful protesters get their freedom of speech right, the right to freedom of speech, and are able to do what they have to do without someone throwing a brick through a window.
Okay, so
Or a guy approaching that group inappropriately, getting right into the march, going right up to a guy with a scanner, and then possibly embellishing his fall to the ground. That older gentleman. So
Nick,
there's
before
a
you finish,
disrespect for police in general, and I think we just need to respect each other. That needs to start happening. And I think
Nick,
Black Lives Matter as a group can really be instrumental in a great mutual respect among people. I really.
Nick, do you have the figure? Do you have the figure of white on white crime?
What's that? White on white crime?
Do you have the figure of white on white crime?
I did. I can't recall it right now.
Okay. Does anyone, before I acquiesce to Sam, does anyone on this panel have the figure of white on white crime? Why is there silence on the panel?
What is it?
Look, I believe that white on white crime was a lot higher. I also heard the figures, but I can't remember it. But
Yeah,
it was
I
a
don't
lot higher.
have the figures, but I did see a documentary on pedophiles, and they were all white.
So why is it that we have the figures, the supposed figures for black on black crime, but we don't have the figures for white on white crime?
Because it seems to be more of a topic.
Yeah, it's
But
just something I looked up because someone,
I would like to add to what Nick was saying as well. Nick, when you were saying about
Yes.
Black Lives Matter can be instrumental, I really agree with you.
Exactly.
And one thing that I do want to mention about Black Lives Matter is actually, it's a question for the panel. Like, it seems to me that their focus is only and solely on police brutality, police, doing the wrong thing, unarmed Black men, killing them, whatever. So if that be the case, my question is, what about Black on Black crime? Like, for example, the retired police officer that was killed. Where was Black Lives Matter for this instance?
This is the problem. The thing is that when it first started, it was a very well organized group, and it was to come to a purpose, to try to bring a solution for this. But it has been defeated by the violence. And the thing is that something could start with Black Lives Matter, and it could expand to a better, to a better understanding. But how can it come to a better understanding when it's going into violence? And what this guy explains is that it's been infiltrated. It is no longer the original organization.
I'd like to read a figure, if I may. Minneapolis police use force against Black people at 7 times the rate of whites. That comes from the New York Times. My director sends me a message. Since 2015, the Minneapolis police have documented using force about 11,500 times for at least 6,650 acts of force. The subject of that force was Black. By comparison, the police force have used force about 2,750 times against white people. So,
yeah, but you can't look at one city, can you, Marcus?
We're not looking at one city. But what we are looking at is we're looking at a planet full of people who seem to be in agreement. They're protesting in Korea. They're protesting in Germany. They are protesting, as a matter of fact, in the jails. There is a hunger strike going on with the people that are supposedly being deported here in the United States. So if this is a global movement, explain to me what I'm missing. Bob, the anonymous conservative, what am I missing?
Well, I want to add something about the infiltration. I think is very problematic in a lot of these groups. And I think, if you look at the original mission of Black Lives Matter, the mission was very good. They don't condone violence, at least initially, but then it's morphed into something else. And I think you get a lot of bad actors in any organization, and that includes the police department.
Yeah.
It's bad apples that spoil the whole organization.
So why are we blaming Black Lives Matter? Why are we blaming Antifa?
Blaming them for what?
We're blaming Antifa. The president has blamed Antifa for a gentleman getting his head cracked on the sidewalk. He's a professional protester. He gets paid.
He said it was staged. The president originally said that was staged.
So the blood on the ground was staged. Mm-hmm. Am I to understand that?
Yeah. Well, the video that I saw, yeah, he did have a kind of a white.
A contusion?
I cannot. It's like it was like a white bag. It was square, and that's where the red liquid came from.
Wow.
But the liquid was on the back of his head. The liquid was in the back of his head.
You mean like in the movie when those pouches that they really?
I'm not saying that that's what it is. I'm just saying what I saw in the video.
Yeah, that's a hard sell.
The blood dripping from the back of his head as he hit the stoop. You see it. If you look at it a number of times, you will see that it bleeds. And not only that, he becomes unconscious. He drops the phone, and his hand becomes limp. The guy was pushed. To be fair, there was a cop who tried to intervene and help the guy, but he was pushed away by other cops there. So and then he wound up in the hospital. He was as far as I heard,
with a brain.
He was in serious condition. He was critical, but not near death. But that could affect. I'm a healthcare provider. That could affect his brain later on.
Well, I'm told that he has a brain injury now.
Head injuries are extremely dangerous, especially assuming that this gentleman is an older man and he's more frail than a younger person. You don't push people. That's the nature of the state. Okay? That's what they do. They do it all over the world. It's called imperialism. They force themselves through, policing actions, military actions, the army. the U.S. Marshals, the Secret Service, they're all police. The state and county and municipal police, they're part of the
military
police system.
is the word.
Oh,
Over like
okay, and we have, guys, we have 5
630,000
minutes remaining. We
policemen
have
in
5
the
minutes
world.
remaining. Let me just switch over to Nick
No,
Morganelli right
So I
quick.
want to. I just have to answer your question.
But
They
I've
were
only got
talking
5
about
minutes.
bricks.
Sorry, Sam. I've only got 5 minutes left. I need to jump over to Nick. Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I didn't know if you had a question. No, I just want to say that, you know, people have to do their job, and the police that day had to do their job, and they were trying to keep peace and order for the people that wanted to exercise their freedom of speech and protest. So they're walking down the street, and I don't know all the details of why they were marching down that particular street or whatever, but maybe they were just there just because the mayor or the governor said, look, we need to keep our city safe. We're going to put these people there and make sure that if anything does go bad, we're going to have it covered because we don't want our city burning down. That gentleman, first of all, interrupted what they were there to do. They were there to walk down the street and keep order. He stepped in front of them, he stepped in front of them, went right up to the police officer and was antagonistic against them. I mean, was it right to push him? No. A police officer just say, sir, step back, or something like that. Maybe somebody did say that, but then at one point, a police officer just said, move aside, sir, and pushed. He didn't push with a lot of force, but he pushed the guy. And to me, it looks like he embellished his fall. If you really look at the video, I'm not so sure that the guy really fell on his own. I'm just saying it's possible. It's possible. But he shouldn't have stepped in front of those police officers. He should have respected their duty that day.
I want to thank everyone for contributing to today's topic. At the end of the day, the man still has a brain injury.
Yeah.
And I don't know what type of interaction with police, unless someone's life is in danger, would justify a brain injury. This is Verbal Assault live stream, and I'm your host, Marky Devereaux. I want to thank you all for being here today. I do want to ask the audience, and I do want to say to the panel, ask yourselves, why are we having figures on black crime, but we don't have figures on white crime? Yeah. Is it because the numbers will be virtually the same, which will negate the argument? Food for thought. Thank you guys for tuning in. We look forward to having you on our program tomorrow, where we will discuss, is blackface next? Dem sporting kente cloth. Is it a fashion or is it a farce? We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're on Google Podcasts. If you're watching us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or YouTube. We are listener supported, so we do hope that you contribute on one of the anchor platforms, as well as Patreon and Twitch. Thank you. We are out.